Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Graceologie with Gwen Smith podcast. I'm Gwen Smith, and I am so glad you've joined me today. Around here, we have fun, faith-focused, grace-filled conversations, all to help you know and trust God more. Our discussions are honest, often humorous, and always practical, and they're going to encourage you in meaningful ways to live out and lean on the grace of Jesus in the midst of cluttered, messy days. You got any of those? I know I do, and I cannot wait to get to today's conversation, which is all about cultivating places of comfort, beauty, and peace in our lives. Today, my guest is Christie Purifoy. She's the author of Roots in Sky and a new book called Placemaker. Christie lives with her husband and 4 children at Maplehurst, which is a Victorian farmhouse in southeastern Pennsylvania, where she spends her time gardening, writing, and making her home a place of worship. In this episode, we talk about the beauty of sinking your roots deep into the life and to the place where you are today. Even if that space is only temporary, even if the place that you're in is a place of frustration or loneliness or pain. She calls it the holy work, and she believes it's a part of how we relate to God and live in the world while we're reflecting His image. It's a timely yet timeless reminder that the cultivation of good and beautiful places is not a retreat from the real world, but it's actually a holy pursuit of a world that is far more real than we know. It's a call to tend the soul, the land, and the places that we share with one another. This conversation is really a sacred invitation to step back from the chaos of today, to pay attention to our feelings, and to move forward in the beauty of God's presence in the community and the commissioning that He calls us to. Well, hello, Christie. I'm super excited to have you on the Graceologie podcast today. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
We were just talking off the air about us having the same literary agent and so many mutual friends. So I love meeting new girlfriends, and that's what I get to do today. So I'm excited to introduce you to my Graceologie community.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. I feel like you've just put out a little welcome mat for me, and I've stepped inside your home, and we're going to sit down and have a conversation and share it with a few others.
Well, if you did that, we would have coffee for me. What would you be drinking?
So it depends on the time of day. If it's earlier in the day, then I am all about the coffee. But after I've had maybe 2 cups, then I switch to tea.
I do the same thing. A lot of times I just like to have a warm mug in my hand.
Right? I actually have a warm mug right here, right now. So.
Oh, man, I'm a little bit jealous because I don't have one and I can't run and get it. No, that's awesome. I love a warm mug. Now, there's a thing we do around here to get to know you, like the fact that you like warm mugs in your hand. And it's called a Fast Fun Favorites round. So are you ready to have a little fun with me?
I am ready to have fun. I don't know how fast I'll be, but I'm totally up for some fun. I'm kind of a slowpoke in life, you know, but I'll do my best.
That's totally okay. All right. So here we go. Christie, who was your favorite character from the cast of Friends?
Oh, okay. So I had a really weird thing where my actual roommate in college was a big Friends fan. And somehow I think I just differentiated myself from my circle of friends by not watching Friends. Isn't that terrible? I don't know what I was thinking. I just have that individual streak. And I think when I was younger, it showed itself in those ways of like, okay, everyone around me is watching Friends. I'm going to take my book out in the hallway. That's a horrible thing to admit about myself.
It's an honest answer. We're all about honesty around here. Well, so that's fine. You don't have a favorite character.
There you go.
Okay, that's so funny. Okay, for a journal, paper or computer?
Oh, paper. Do people journal on computers? I can't even imagine. Although I will say, so I am a writer. I have to write on a computer. I think I grew up with being able to move text around and delete things. But yeah, there's something about it, journaling that feels different than writing to me. I need that pen in hand. I need that paper. I need to sit quiet. Maybe because it's slow. Maybe that's it. It slows you down.
I totally agree with that. And I have to have colored pens.
Oh,
I know.
I haven't thought about that, but that would definitely make it more fun.
It is. I have to have a different color pen with every entry.
Oh, so it's like
I
a
know.
rainbow journal.
I'm sorry. They're getting to know me more. I need to get them to know you more.
Well, I have a little girl who would love your rainbow journal. She is all about rainbows. So
That's so great. Okay, so here, another question. Christie, would you go to a movie alone?
I would, but you know what? I don't think I ever have. So it's a funny thing where I feel like, yeah, I would do that, but I don't do that.
That's fair. Okay, so I know you're a gardener, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Are tomatoes a fruit or a vegetable?
Oh, goodness. So I believe technically they're a fruit, but to be honest, in my book, they're a vegetable because they feel like something I'm supposed to grow, something useful, something practical. And more, I am growing things that are just beautiful.
That's a good answer. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at trivia?
Okay, trivia about what, right? It depends. But I say I'm pretty good. I'll give see, I hope you don't test me, but now I'm going to give myself a 6.
No, that's good. Okay, now another on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you enjoy garlic?
9.
Oh, me too. I love it. Okay,
Yeah.
So LA or New York?
Oh, New York. Actually, I was just in New York on Monday. Yeah. So yesterday I was in New York. No, I'm sorry, on Sunday. I was in New York 2 days ago with my husband and my oldest child. And we love New York City and feel really lucky to live close enough that we can take a train in.
Yeah, that's totally cool. I took a train from Philly to New York once back in the day and loved it. It's an experience in and of itself. But
It is.
It's so funny. The last time I was in New York City was when my daughter turned 16 and we went for her 16th getaway weekend and had a blast. Well, we literally came up in the subway in Times Square and we were pulling our luggage, hadn't even gotten to the hotel yet. And as we're literally approaching the crosswalk, all of a sudden I look up and there is another one of our literary agent sisters, is Ann Voskamp. And we literally, Ann and her daughters, and we looked at each other and we're like, no way.
That's wild.
It was hilarious. It was just like, how in the world do we end up seeing each other in Times Square in New York City?
In New York.
It was
That's
so
crazy.
bananas. I know. So of course we took pictures and then sent them to Bill and all that kind of stuff and had fun.
Oh, good. Well, yep, I was just there, but I don't think I saw anyone I knew, but we still had a great time.
Yeah, it's always fun. It's always lots of energy going on there.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. How do you feel about avocados?
I feel passionately fond of avocados.
That is so the
I
same.
love avocados. I put them on everything.
I know. I think Jesus loves them too.
Oh, yeah, of course.
For sure. Okay, Christie, what was your favorite book growing up?
Oh, that's an easy one. The Secret Garden. Ooh. I loved that book. But I was growing up in Texas, and my dad was actually a gardener, and it made me want to garden. But then I would step outside, and it was so hot and humid, and the mosquitoes would start biting that I thought, never mind, I'll go back in and read about it.
There you go. That's a good movie, too. Okay, yes. So, Christie, what fashion trend do you just not get?
Okay, let's think. So I'm just going to say anything that hurts to wear, anything that's uncomfortable, I just don't get it. So, high heels, which aren't really a trend, but, they're a thing. I am all about comfort, but I don't mind looking quirky or different. I kind of like that. But yeah, it's got to be comfortable.
Cool. Are you a lover or a fighter?
Oh, a lover all the way.
Do you like spending more time alone or more time around people?
Alone. With apologies to my husband and 4 children. I love them too, and my friends. I love them dearly, but being alone is as necessary to me as food and water.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Are you a task-oriented person or a people-oriented person? We might have just answered this.
Yeah, I think more task-oriented. Yeah, to be sure. Although I'm a dreamer, too. I'm not really a list maker or a detail person. I like dreams and big pictures, but yeah, probably tasks.
Cool. What's your favorite day of the week?
Friday, and Friday afternoon in particular, because it's all good after that.
That's the window of happiness for sure.
Yes, it is.
Okay, what's the last song you downloaded? or that you searched for?
I have no idea.
Artist?
It was probably something my daughter told me about, and then the name is left me. But she's so sweet. She's 15, my oldest, and she's always telling me about this or that new artist. And then she tells me, and they're my age, Mom. And I think, what? Who are these teenagers making music?
I know. Well, I know. My kids, actually, my oldest son loves to share music with me, and I love that. So I'm usually just pressing play off of a text. But okay.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Who was your first celebrity crush?
Okay, not a celebrity, but I do remember there was some movie version. Oh, no, it was the musical of Oliver Twist. What's that called? Oliver? Is it just called Oliver?
Oliver, yeah.
Yeah, I think the little boy who played Oliver, I mean, he must have been a little boy, right? Like I was maybe 12.
Okay.
I thought he was so cute. Who knows who that guy is, who that kid was?
I just remember the song, Consider Yourself at Home. Yeah.
Oh, I loved it. I loved it so much.
Okay, 2 more questions. Number 1, dawn or dusk?
Dawn.
I knew you were going to say that. Okay, and final question. If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
I would go to Edwardian England, so like early 1900s, and it's been a weird fascination of mine ever since I was a kid. I can remember being little or a little girl and wishing I could wear high button boots, which kind of goes against what I was saying earlier about comfortable clothes. But I had this fascination with it. Yeah, I wanted to use a button hook and everything, so I guess I would still go back to try it out.
Were you a Jane Austen fan?
I just loved anything old-fashioned, and yeah. So I think in high school I became a Jane Austen fan, and I still am. Oh yeah, love it.
Yeah, definitely. What's not to love? So that's so cool. Guys, today's episode of the Graceologie with Gwen Smith podcast is sponsored by my absolute favorite seasonal subscription box, FabFitFun. Listen, you can receive 20% off your first box when you go to fabfitfun.com and use the code Graceologie. So if you don't already know about it, it's a seasonal box with full-size beauty, fitness, and lifestyle products. Their winter editor's box was amazing, so I'm super stoked to get my spring box, which I believe is going to be epic. It always is. Do not miss it because they sell out fast. Be sure to check out fabfitfun.com and then use the code Graceologie so that you can save $10 off your first box, which makes it only $39.99. Again, that's fabfitfun.com and use the code Graceologie to save 20% off your first box. Now I want to kind of get to know you in the heart of where God has you with this new book, The Placemaker. I love this. Yes, the subtitle is Cultivating Places of Comfort, Beauty, and Peace. So how did you come up with those 3 words, comfort, beauty, and peace?
You know, I didn't have them when I began the book. I had the word placemaker. That idea of placemaking has been important to me for a while. But the words really came as I began to write. I sort of wrote myself to them, I guess. You know, when I started, I knew that placemaking was about beauty, but I didn't realize how much it had to do with peace. And in some of the stories I tell, particularly about some sorrow and some hard things, I discovered just how much places, if they're tended and loved and cared for, how much places can comfort us. And I think it's one of the ways that God can meet us and minister to us. And so the peace part of it and the comfort part of it surprised me.
Yeah. So that is the title of your book, Placemaker. So what does it mean to be a placemaker? Help our listeners understand, okay, what is the angle here and the main message of it? What is a placemaker?
A placemaker is really, there's just someone who sinks their roots deep into a place. And they do this even if they know they maybe aren't staying forever. Maybe they know they're moving on in 6 months or, a couple of years. So even if that place is a temporary place, they are willing to love it and to care for it. And the book is really about the fact that I think that is holy work. I think that it's a part of how we relate to God. It's a part of how we live in the world in his image. I think God is a placemaker. Yeah, so it might remind some of our listeners of another word. It might sound like homemaker, and I think it's related to that. But homemaker we tend to use for quite specific purposes, I think, and placemaker is just a bigger word. It holds more. Yeah, it holds this book.
Well, that's interesting because when I was young in marriage, Brad and I had our 3 kids in 3.5 years. And then we literally lived in 4 homes in 5 years.
Wow,
and
yeah.
it is so vital. I'll never forget reading a book that encouraged me so much. It was by Susan Miller, and it was called After You Unpack the Boxes. And it was
I like
really,
that.
yeah, After You Unpack the Boxes. If you're listening and you just moved and you need this, I'll put a link in the show notes. But it helped me because it talks about the importance for women in particular about assimilation and just getting, which is what you're talking about, roots. It's about belonging and community and connectivity, and it was so important for me. And I just know that we are such a transient community nowadays that this is a message that is really, really important. And sometimes it's just we're moving, not even physically, but to a new season even.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah, and there's just no guarantees. I mean, I was noticing you shared on Instagram not too long ago about what happened to your house and that disruption. And so I don't know how much you've talked about that on the podcast, but we never know, right? The future is always uncertain. But this book is really, I hope it helps people to be courageous, to go ahead and love, and to go ahead and let yourself love the place where you are, even if that place is imperfect, even if you might lose that place tomorrow. Love is always risky in that way, but it's worthwhile. It's absolutely worthwhile.
I know as you say that, I could just sense that there are some listeners who are like, I don't want to be where I am. Yeah. So how can they love it? Why should they love it?
Yeah. I write in this book, Placemaker, I too have lived in many different places, and I write about one place in particular that was, it was my desert. It was my wilderness. It was a very hard place to be. And I didn't love it. I didn't. I wanted more than anything to leave. I wanted what was next. But what was next, which for me is the place where I live now and is a very good place, a place where I just hope to stay as long as possible. I couldn't have come here without there. So every place has some gift to give. But I don't want to sugarcoat that. I don't want to say, oh, stuff those feelings down and be grateful for what you have. Because actually, I think we can, if we're willing to really pay attention to how we're feeling, if we're willing to really pay attention to our own even dissatisfaction with a place, that can be a gift. And I learned a lot about who I really was and what my life was really meant to be about in the place that was so hard for me. So I hear that, and man, my heart goes out to those women because I've been there, and it is not fun. It's not easy, but it can be as I think, purposeful as winter. I'm a gardener, so I know that there are beautiful things that cannot grow without winter. They just can't. They can't. Certain trees can't fruit without a certain number of, freezing nights, like peaches, for example. So I know that winter is necessary. And I think sometimes we're living in places, or we're going through seasons that are like winter in that way. And they're not, I won't call them good necessarily. They're certainly not easy, but God can be with us in those places in I think some really unique ways. And I think we can trust him that those places, those seasons can be a part of good fruit in our lives. But it's not easy. It's not easy.
But that's really powerful, Christie, because if you're listening now and this is your season, you feel like, I'm in a winter. I don't want to be in this place, or that's the case. I think the power of what you just shared, Christie, is that the hope that there are beautiful things that cannot come into your life without winter. And that in and of itself, I think, can inform the way we pray. I see this releasing, this opening of the palms, the things we're trying to hold so tightly to, the things that we feel we deserve, the things that we feel we're not getting, this releasing, saying, all right, Lord, I recognize this is winter. I don't like it. I don't like the way I'm feeling. I've got, but I would think that even in those seasons, it's about a releasing trusting and a yielding to the time, to the move, to the place. And so, wow, that's really important stuff.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
But I think you're exactly right, that there's a lot to receive if we submit it to God in that way. And I think we can hold on to hope. I write a lot about the promises God makes around this idea of a wilderness. And I think one thing he would say to each of us is, I led you in and I will lead you out again. I think we can hold him to that, and we can trust him to do that and to be with us in the wilderness.
Yes, absolutely. And he says that he is doing a new thing. And so that we need to trust his new thing. And I love that. I love the promises of Scripture. And I do believe that even if we're in our winters and if we're in a place of wilderness, it is the Word of God that is going to help link our frustrations to his hope. And I think that's a powerful. So just looking at the fact that you said you were born in Texas or raised in Texas, and then I know that you actually went to college in Chicago, and now you're in southeastern Pennsylvania. Yeah. You've been a lot. You've been around. So what has been your journey to getting to where you are now? I mean, your home is called Maplehurst. What's the story behind that name? Give me scoop on that.
That's right. Yeah. We I feel like we inherited this place from the people who went before, the people who built it and made it and cared for it. And those people also named it. So this old house, this old red brick farmhouse where we live now and have lived for the past few years, we're working on restoring it. It came to us with a name, Maplehurst. So even though we didn't name it, we've carried on that name, and it just reminds me, I think, that just how much this place doesn't belong to me. I know we talk about, we're caretakers, we're not owners, but there's something about being in an old house that came with a name that really brings that home. Yes. I can't even pretend to think that this place belongs to me, but with God's help, we're taking care of it, we're restoring it. And that's one of the stories, it's one thread throughout the book Placemaker that I tell, is how we came here, I think, full of a lot of, we really felt led by God to this place. And we came with a lot of optimism and a lot of confidence in our own ability to take care of a place and to better it, to make it better and more beautiful. And here we have bumped up, I'd say, pretty hard against our own inadequacies, our own limitations, or limitations of time and money and everything else that you find when you're trying to restore an old house. It's been so much harder than we expected, and that's part of the story I tell in the book. But in the end, I think I've learned so much more about placemaking, about God's heart for places, and about how to share places with other people. Because it turns out and I say we, meaning mostly me and my husband, we weren't just the two of us really able to care for this place. We actually needed a community of helpers and other people, doing the work with us. And so placemaking has become, for us here at Maplehurst, less individual and more about community, which has been really beautiful. But it's only happened because we realized, the hard way, that we couldn't do it all ourselves.
Well, that'll preach, girl, because we can't do it all ourselves. And as you were even describing Maplehurst, my thoughts are going back to my childhood, because you're in southeast Pennsylvania, and I was raised in southwest Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yeah, but I grew up in a century home that was built in 1830 by Jacob Eisman, who was my great something something. And so and then my house over the years has my house, I call it it's my mom's house now. My house was had many additions, and but the core of it is an old red brick farmhouse that literally the has the 6 brick thick walls, like the door frames. Do you have that?
Yes.
I was wondering.
They're great for insulation.
Yeah,
like this place stays really warm in the winter. Yeah.
Well, and you don't feel like the walls are going to fall in, even if it's the windiest of days, because they're so well constructed, those old farmhouses. But that's super cool. And so I had these memories flooding back. I know that you're into gardening, not necessarily the vegetables and fruits, right? But when I was growing up, because I lived on that, that setting of the old farm, even though we didn't farm it per se, we had huge gardens. And so, and then you talk about about not being able to do it yourself, the only way we could do that was to have me and all my sibs. I'm one of 5 kids born in 8 years. And my dad in summers, when we would wake up, he made us share in the harvesting. So I'm going to say that. That's my adult way of saying he gave us chores, and we had to work our butts off every day before we could go play. That was our responsibility.
I love that.
Yeah.
Of course, now I'm wondering, when you grew up, did that mean that you wanted nothing to do with gardening?
Well, I have one little tiny cilantro plant on my sun porch right now. That's all I got. Because it was work, girl. We had these, I'm talking huge, like football field size gardens. And like I said, I'm one of 5 kids. So we would have everything from corn to zucchini to tomatoes to peppers to potatoes, where you have to dig them out from underneath the ground and all of that. Yeah. So cucumbers, everything. And then when Dad would go off to work in the morning, he would write out a list. So he'd put all the kids' names down. It'd be like, Gwen, weed 2 rows of tomatoes and pick a row of green peppers. And I couldn't go play with my friends or watch television or do anything until that was done. And so that was, or if maybe I had to water it if we were in a dry season. And so I would have to go to the creek with a bucket and, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. So
you're giving me ideas for this summer, actually. I've got 4 kids. So
great, the kids are going to hate me. No, but it teaches you, it teaches you responsibility. And I appreciate that in my experience, but also it paints a picture of exactly what you were saying, is we can't do it alone. We need community. So tell me, what has that looked like with you at Maplehurst, and what lessons has God taught you from that?
Yeah. And, honestly, I think it even began much earlier. We lived in the city. We lived in Chicago for 10 years. And so that kind of living is very different from what I have now here in this old farmhouse. But I think lessons I learned there about living with people, about what it's really like to be a neighbor, so we lived in this old apartment building with other apartment owners, and we had to make joint decisions about, what temperature to set the boiler in winter, and whether or not we were going to replace the peeling wallpaper. And that was hard. It would have been
make those
easier.
Decisions with your neighbors?
Yes, because we owned the
temperature of the place.
Yes,
no way.
Yeah, we owned the building jointly, basically. A lot of those old apartment buildings are set up legally as like condominiums. So, we could control more or less what was happening within our 4 walls. But, the building had an old radiator system connected to a boiler in the basement. And that meant it was set down there, and we all had to live with it. So, yeah, it was not not easy, but it was rich and good in ways that, I think, gosh, my life would be different if I'd never had those experiences, if I'd never had to make a place with other people. I was also, so I started gardening in Chicago on the invitation of a friend at a community garden. So, in our apartment, we didn't have a backyard. I couldn't garden in the way that I do now, but a friend invited me to share a plot in a community garden. And so even my introduction to gardening was about making a place with other people. And it was sometimes idyllic and quite often not. I'll never forget showing up one morning, finally ready to harvest this cantaloupe that we had planted and watched grow all summer, and somebody had stolen it in the night. It was gone. So, there were disappointments, but, so here at Maplehurst, I feel like we came and we had these dreams of creating this place and sharing it with others. But I never imagined that some of the people we'd be sharing it with would be bricklayers and plasterers and window restorers. And, honestly, we probably wouldn't have bought this old house if we realized just how much work still needed to be done. But
Money
we
pit.
didn't know. Yep. Exactly. We had no idea, thankfully. And the people who've come in to help us and to share their knowledge with us and their skills, some of them have become like family, honestly. And that's a gift I never even knew to look for.
That is a gift. I love that. So tell me, what does gardening look like for you today?
Yeah, it looks pretty different than it did in Chicago. But changing. So the first thing we did when we moved here is we planted this big vegetable garden. I'd never had my own big vegetable garden. I had tried during a couple of years when we lived in Florida, but vegetable gardening is different in Florida. You have to know how to work with the the heat down there. And I really didn't. So I struggled. But up here, we put in a big vegetable garden right away. And then over time, I just realized I was growing more and more flowers. And I had to sort of come to grips with, at first I had thought, well, being a gardener is very practical, right? I'm growing food for my family and I'm harvesting it and I'm freezing it and canning it. And there was really no way to justify the flower growing in practical terms. And that's also something that I explore in this book, the sense that placemaking can often look extravagant, it can look foolish, it can look indulgent. Yes. I think that's a big one in our culture. It can look like, how could that be holy work? That's selfish. That's, and so that's something I have to wrestle through, is this strong desire I have to cultivate beauty. And finally, through the stories I'm telling in this book, realizing like that desire was placed in me by God, and it's good. And sure, like anything, it can be, taken to an extreme or abused, but essentially it's a good thing in me. And when I do it, when I live it out, I think I'm participating in something with God. It's a kind of partnership. It's all about participation.
It really is. So what flower are you loving right now?
So I will always love roses. My father grew roses when I was growing up, and some of the stories I tell in the book are about the history of rose growing, actually, in this little Pennsylvania town where I live. It's an important part of this town's history, and it was fascinating to me to learn and to weave those stories in with my own stories of growing roses. But what do I not love growing? I also love growing dahlias because they bloom when everything else is finished and tired, and they're still going strong, sometimes into November, which is really special. So, but picking a favorite flower is a little bit like picking a favorite child.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
No, I get that. Hey guys, I've got an exciting announcement. I host a 5-part online Bible study called The Psalm Adventure. I've had tons of questions and conversations, and I've gotten so many emails and messages asking me how you can know what God says about forgiveness and healing, and fear and depression, and finances and relationships and hope. You want to know how to connect your personal struggles to the promises of God, and you want to know what His heart for you is. And that's exactly what we explore in our Psalm Adventure, because we're going right to the source of all grace and all truth. We're going to the Bible. So I invite you to join me for my next live Psalm Adventure. Each week we meet for live sessions online, we seek God's heart together, and grow as a Graceologie community. Even if you've never done a Bible study before in your life, I promise you this Psalm Adventure is doable and will really help connect your needs to God's provision and your questions to God's answers. So join me and allow the Lord to restore your strength and your peace, heart, mind, and soul. Learn more about the study and register today by visiting gwensmith.net/psalmadventure. That's gwensmith.net/psalmadventure. It's just fascinating to hear how God is at work teaching you that, almost like that space, that breathing, that appreciation, that looking at nature to see a reflection of Him. It is holy work, and it is something that we should have time for. And I love to hear you speak of that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that it's about seeing, because I think, I don't expect that everyone who reads this book is going to go out and start gardening. Now, I think actually some might. I hope that my own stories are inspiring.
Might not be me.
Right, but that's not really the point. The point of the book. But one thing, as I write about my own gardens, as I write about nature, I tell lots of stories about trees in this book because they've been so inspiring to me. And I hope in doing that it means that, women will put the book down and their eyes will be open to the fact that there are trees all around that in some ways really are clapping their hands and praising God, trees planted by, created by God and planted often by people, and that that they would just have new eyes, I think, to see what is special or beautiful about all the places God has made. Some places are harder to love than others. Absolutely. Absolutely. But every place has something if we see it, I think, with eyes of love, which is how God sees us. And I think that's how God sees the world. It's through eyes of love. And so, this book is really meant, I think, to help women have those eyes of love for their own homes, for their own, whether it's a tiny apartment, whether it's in the city or it's in the country, and eyes of love for even the things growing around them that they didn't plant. It might just be trees in the park. Honestly, those were the first trees I noticed and started to love and appreciate. And now I'm planting trees, but tree planting won't be for all of us, but seeing the trees, noticing the trees, I think that's something that we're all invited to be a part of. Yeah,
because I noticed that the chapter titles in your book all have trees or forests. And so the significance of that is what?
So when I started to sit down and write this book and tell these stories, and I thought, I just can't write a how-to book. I just thought that would be boring for me to write and probably boring for people to read. I mean, a how-to book can be a good thing when you just need to learn a new skill. And there's certainly how-to elements in Placemaker. But really, I just wanted to write stories that would inspire people to plant a seed or, set their table with care or put up some new wallpaper and see that as a valuable thing to do. And I thought, well, what inspires me? And it's quite honestly, it's the beauty of creation. It's the beauty of the world outside my window. And it's the beauty in particular of trees. I think trees are special because trees, in a way, they make a place, right? So, a shady place beneath, a couple of trees is wholly different from a place just out there with no trees and no dappled shade. Those trees really create the space underneath them. And trees create peaceful places. I mean, I think, whether we've ever given trees much thought, most of us, if I, kind of talked through a picture of sitting beneath a tall tree and hearing the wind blowing in the leaves, we would feel a sense of peace. Trees do that. I think trees were designed by God to do that. And so in writing this book about how do we create places of peace for ourselves and for others, I felt like there were probably things I could learn from the trees. And so telling all these tree stories, all the stories of all the trees that are in all the places where I've lived was my attempt to do that, to learn from the trees, and so to learn from their creator.
That's beautiful. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that keep us from placemaking in our life?
Yeah. Well, I could speak from my own life that for a long time it was this kind of false dichotomy, this false division I had set up in my mind between spiritual things and everything else. Mm-hmm. I grew up with parents who were in ministry, and though my father was a gardener, and though he often did projects around the house and he took good care of our home, as a kid growing up, I would never have said that was holy work. The holy work was when he went off to preach or teach, or when he traveled to foreign countries. Like, that was what it meant to be a Christian. And it took me a long time. God really had to sort of break down, I think, some of the walls in that thinking. And, it's still a process. It's still easy for me to say, well, these things, maybe they're ministry related or church related, these things matter. And starting seeds for these flowers, clearly that's less important. But I feel like I've been unlearning that for a long time, and I'm still unlearning that. So part of it, and part of the point of the book, is just to, I think, remind us all of who created beauty to begin with, and all this beauty, who is it pointing us to? And then to say beauty does matter. Yes. So I think, first of all, that's, sort of getting over some of those self-imposed hurdles. But then honestly, it's also things as prosaic as money. We feel like maybe I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I'm limited in all these ways. And that can be really discouraging. So I write pretty honestly about that too. Especially taking care of this old house has been a challenge. Sometimes I've been called to spend money on things. I write about some of the pruning we had to do on the old trees, the old maple trees that gave this house its name, and how I thought, this feels wasteful. How can I spend money on trees when there's so much need in the world? And God had to gently lead me through that too. And I think when we're taking care of places and we're doing it out of faithfulness to what God has called us to, that we can trust him even with our lack of funds, and even with the discouragement that can come from that.
Yeah, definitely. I love what you're saying. I feel like it's about being present with the presence of God and acknowledging. I mean, there is in nature such an echo of God's glory. And if we don't pause to see it, we're not going to hear the echo, in some ways. So I have to ask, because I'm super curious, but you have a PhD in English literature from the University of Chicago. And now you're living in southeastern Pennsylvania and gardening. So, and you're writing. So help me understand, has your life, how did that happen? Has your life and career turned out the way you thought it would? You got to hear.
Wow. Great question. And the short answer is no, not at all. Oh, it's true. I had dreams for so long of being an English professor. I loved books. I didn't see myself as a writer, actually, for a long time, but I loved books. I loved reading. I enjoyed teaching. So I just kept going to school for books. And eventually earned the PhD. That's why we were in Chicago all those years. And then, slowly and gently, God just sort of pried my fingers off of that particular dream. And honestly, now, even though there were losses, I experienced through that process, I can say, oh, thank you, God. Yeah. You knew me better than I knew myself. Your plans for me were good. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Awesome. I do sometimes still look. I have still my old interview suit hanging in my closet. I think it's at the back. And sometimes I'll be looking for something and I'll see it back there. And I do feel a pang because I dreamed in that direction for so long. And it didn't take me where I thought it would take me. I've ended up in a very different place doing different work. I'm no longer teaching, but I am writing. I'm now creating books, which is fun and something I never imagined doing. But, our feelings about these things can be complicated. And I think we're allowed that, right?
Yes.
It's not simple. But mostly what I feel is immense gratitude that God has brought me to Maplehurst, that God has made me a gardener, that God has given me an opportunity to write these stories and share beauty with readers. I feel incredibly privileged and grateful. And even if I still feel a pang of, wow, this isn't what I thought my life would be, that I can say thank you for what it is.
I think that's so cool. And I think it's easy for us to just quote Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and he will make you, and he will make your path straight. It does not mean that it's not going to have like ebbs and flows and lots of twists and turns. It's just going to be straight toward his heart. I love that he surprised you, but he's faithful in it. And I think that we would all say that if we're backing out of, looking at the big picture of where he's leading us, what he's teaching us, and where he needs to take us to get there, even through the winters, even through those times of wilderness. So these last few moments with you, I would love to get practical. So I'm going to call you Dr. Christie.
All right.
So
put on my professor hat. Pull it from the back of the closet.
Yes, let's go street level. Let's get real practical. Can you offer any suggestions of what the Graceologie listeners can do today or this week to move forward with this?
I think number one will sound easy, but it isn't. I think the first thing is just to pay attention. It's hard to do, honestly, when we're, life moves so fast and there's so much going on and we're busy and, there's a lot to distract us, but pay attention. And by pay attention, I mean, maybe something like if anyone has read Brother Lawrence and how he talks about practicing the presence of God and just in our ordinary moments, remembering God, just saying, oh yeah, God is here. So practicing that presence. But one way to do that is just to pay attention to the beauty that's around us. I mean, right now it's winter here and it can be a little harder, but the light in the afternoons is beautiful. The bare trees, when they're silhouetted against the sky, they're so lacy looking. They're also beautiful. So slowing down enough just to pay attention to the beauty that is around us. And then remembering that beauty is an invitation. It's an invitation maybe in a lot of different directions, but number one, just to remember remember that beauty was put here by God, and God is also here with us. But yeah, let me get even more practical and say, I would just encourage our listeners to tend something. Maybe it's a pet, maybe it's a garden, maybe it's just your cilantro plant that you
it's a little thing.
Maybe it's a sourdough starter for bread, but just something that needs our care. So, take care of something, and then see where it leads you. I just think that's how we were made. We were made to care. We were made to tend. We were made to cultivate, and it can look like a lot of different things. But if you look at your life and you feel like, wow, I don't actually have anything like that, then start small. Bring home a house plant, or ask a friend how to make sourdough bread and tend that starter. It doesn't have to be big.
Yeah. It's called a SCOBY, right?
Oh, yes. So I actually have not been a good tender of my kombucha SCOBY lately, but that's another good option.
I love kombucha.
SCOBY has been neglected.
Is sourdough starter called SCOBY also?
I don't know. It might be, because it's probably much the same thing.
If not, I'm going to get 27,000 emails saying, it's not a SCOBY.
Your listeners can let us know. But essentially, yeah, it's that little bit of starter stuff.
Yeah.
And it needs tending, and then it will repay us.
So practical. We should pay attention to pause, to look, to consider beauty and light, and really recognize beauty in nature as an invitation to worship, really, to be in communion with the Lord, to live responsively to His creation. And I love that. And then tend something, help something grow, no matter whether it's a little cilantro plant or a child or a dog, or a friendship. There's things we can tend to that are meaningful. And what it is actually takes our eyes beyond our own selves and moves it to something else.
Exactly. Yeah. I love your idea to tend a friendship. And I think maybe practically, okay, what does it look like? Okay, we can think step by step. What does it look like to grow flowers? Well, what does it look like step by step in your own life to grow a friendship? Does it mean a phone call? Does it mean sitting down and writing out, a handwritten note? Does it mean, I don't know, an invitation to dinner? But just to think, okay, what are the steps I can actually take to tend this relationship? I think that's just a really beautiful way to look at it.
I do too. I think that's valuable, and I think it's going to help all of us move forward in the comfort, the beauty, and the peace of the Lord. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this conversation, Christie, and I would be honored if you would pray over our Graceologie communities with the heart of this message.
I would be honored to do it. Thanks for the invitation.
Excellent.
Well, let's pray. Dear God, who made this beautiful world and a beautiful people to inhabit it, help us to see you in the world around us, whether the places we find ourselves are easy to be in or not. Help us to see our homes and our communities with your eyes, through eyes of love, and encourage us in the ways that we are already caring for our places, especially if it feels endless or futile or mindlessly repetitive. Encourage us in that good work and inspire us to cultivate beauty, peace, and comfort for ourselves and for all those around us, Lord. I think too, God, I want to pray that for those who are living through winter, I pray that you would encourage their hearts, that they would lift up their eyes and see the promise of spring that you offer, a promise you will fulfill. Spring will come. Help us, each one of us, Lord, to hold on until it does. And when it comes, may we give thanks to you as the author of spring, the one who dreamed it up to begin with. And we know and we believe that one day we will live in an endless spring at home with you. So encourage us with that thought. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. The book is Placemaker, Cultivating Places of Comfort, Beauty, and Peace. The author is Christie Purifoy, and it has been such a joy having you on the Graceologie show today. Christie, where can our Graceologie listeners connect with you online?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, they can find me at ChristiePurifoy.com. Christie is Christie. And I love interacting with people on Instagram at Christie Purifoy because I feel like it's just one more way that I can practice hospitality. I love to give glimpses of this place, Maplehurst. So if any of our listeners want to know more about Maplehurst or what it's like here, I think Instagram would be a good place to find me.
So thanks, Christie. And you guys know, if in my Graceologie community, that each of our shows has a whole page dedicated to show notes. So all the links, the books, the references, and some show notes are going to be available at gwensmith.net/Graceologie. Christie Purifoy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It has been so lovely.
Wasn't that a powerful conversation? Be sure to visit Christie online and connect with her on social media. Today's show was edited by Chad Shuping, and the music is by PremiumBeat.com. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, I am all ears. I want to hear what's going on in your heart. Hit me with a DM on Instagram. I'm at Gwen Smith Music. All links and show notes from today's episode can be found at gwensmith.net/Graceologie. That's gwensmith.net/Graceologie. As always, thanks for joining me today. I'll be back soon with another episode, but until then, if you haven't already subscribed, please go to iTunes and subscribe to the Graceologie with Gwen Smith podcast. Subscriptions and reviews on iTunes make a huge impact for those of us who are working hard to bring you these shows. And definitely go find me on social media. I'm at Gwen Smith Music on every platform. Now get out there and have a beautiful, grace-filled day. Once again, I want to thank FabFitFun for being our sponsor today. Hey, don't forget to head over to fabfitfun.com and use the coupon code GRACEOLOGY for 20% off your first box. You're going to love it.